Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this evening's live stream. As you can see, we're having to take special precautions this evening because we're talking about such a sensitive topic that I've already, so not me, I mean, someone's already been reported and recorded for a hate incident for talking about this topic, about children's needs from mother and father. So we're going to have to maintain some anonymity this evening. But joining me tonight, we have Phil. Sorry, not Phil. And then right, anyway, so you get the you get the idea. You couldn't resist a bit of fun at Police Scotland's expense.
The Masked Crusader.
Yeah. I mean, it is true. They say my name is on a Police Scotland database for a hate incident for saying children need a mum and a dad, ideally. So if that's a hate incident, this evening is going to be a hate fest. The number of hate incidents is going to be like hate incident bingo later on. So I hope they're watching. But welcome to Phil up in Durness. Good to have you with us.
Good to be here. Lovely to be on the show tonight. Unfortunately, I can only be here for 15 minutes and then I'm booked for another show in America.
Yeah. Phil's talking about something just for the first 10 minutes. But before we launch into that, I'm going to go through just a little bit of family party news as usual. We've had, again, lots of people coming forward to be council election candidates. That's brilliant. Still, if you are interested in that, email chairman@scottishfamily.org, chairman@scottishfamily.org. And he'll give you the information. We're having a Zoom meeting for people interested in that on Friday. Again, to emphasize, if you're interested in being a really active candidate, campaigning, having a leaflet made for you, all that sort of thing, that's great. If you haven't really got the time for that, but you're just willing to put your name on the ballot paper so people can vote for what they believe in for the Scottish Family Party in a ward in your council, then we really value that as well. So if you're interested, chairman@scottishfamily.org. I was in Kirkcaldy last night for a meeting. That was great. I'll just tell you quickly what's coming up. Then we'll go to Phil. Wednesday next week, Wednesday the 16th, we've got a meeting in Paisley. Keep an eye on social media. Thursday next week, we've got a meeting in Dumbarton. 21st of February, that's a Monday. There's a meeting in Edinburgh. 21st of February, Edinburgh. 24th of February, Stirling. Meeting in Stirling. 2nd of March, Greenock. 2nd of March, Greenock. That's a Wednesday. And then on the 3rd of March, we've got two meetings on the same night. That doesn't happen very often in the family party. But there is a meeting in Ayr about the government sex education resources. People are going to be invited to. And there's a meeting in Dundee as well. So Ayr and Dundee on the 3rd of March. I may as well go another page. Then 12th of March, we're having a sort of Saturday morning conference event in Stornoway, which I haven't spoken to Phil about, but we may as well do this live on air. Phil, I'm hoping you'll be able to come over to that and speak.
That's
but
wonderful.
we can check that. Hopefully you'll be able to make it. Right, so that's what's coming up. So, Phil, what we do with the live stream sometimes is for the first 10 minutes, someone comes on and just tells us about something they found about it, an issue they've unearthed. So, Phil, over to you. What have you got for us today?
So maybe I think a lot of you guys remember that in October and November there were a lot of reports, not just in Scotland but all over the UK, that young women were spiked in pubs and discos with needles, and it was a real epidemic, a pandemic almost, of people being spiked with needles, and there were horrendous reports, and a lot of universities actually had special events highlighting the dangers, and there was something organized called Girl Nights In, where women dared to not go out to get drunk. They stayed at home and got drunk at home just to stay safe. Well, now in January, the Scottish police came out with a report that there was not a single case of needle spiking. And you could, of course, say, well, how do they know that? And there are several indicators. First of all, scientists or people that work in the area of drugs, there were obviously blood tests done. And the kind of drug that can actually be administered with a needle can be found in the bloodstream for quite some time. And none of these drugs were discovered. What was discovered were high levels of alcohol and sometimes other recreational drugs that cannot be administered with a needle and that are also not associated with spiking. And just to highlight the proportions, there were thousands of women claimed that they were spiked with needles, and they shared their images of like teeny tiny little like pinpoints, and they're like, this is where I was spiked. What is funny is that not a single one of these women could remember like being spiked with a needle. So, and there were quite a few that could remember the whole evening. So some blacked out, but most of them didn't black out. And none of them could remember actually a sharp pain. Now, sorry, but if I would get pricked with a needle, I think I would feel it. I think I would feel the pain. Also, in none of these cases were the young women, and there were some men that also claimed to have been spiked with a needle. In none of these cases were the people taken advantage of. So they weren't being mugged. There was no sexual harassment or anything else. And the experts also said that even if one person would figure out how to spike somebody, you can't reproduce it in many places because it's difficult to get to these substances, and apparently, and it's also very inconvenient and very difficult to spike somebody with a needle. So it turns out the whole thing was, I don't want to call it a hoax, but it was mass hysteria. One woman came out and said, I think I was spiked. The media reported about it. And then a lot of young people, probably people that maybe came out of lockdown and weren't used to drinking anymore or something like that, thought that they were spiked. And I find that terrifying in regards to other claims of spiking and false allegations in the Me Too era. I think it highlights how often hysteria can take a hold of people, and it devalues the experiences of real victims, of people that have really been spiked or people that have really been harassed. Over to you, Rick.
The media are just ready to pick up a story like that. Was it discussed in the Parliament?
I think it was, yes. I didn't look into that, but that's a very good point. I'm pretty sure it was.
It's just the sort of thing that would hit the Parliament, and it would be discussed. But when I listen to that, I just think it's a conspiracy theory. That should be classed as a conspiracy theory, where people are assuming ill will on behalf of a group of people and a degree of organization to, someone's selling this kit, someone's spreading this knowledge, and that there's a group of people. It's not an isolated case. There's a group of people deliberately doing this, but it's just not true. But it's funny, it's conspiracy theories that fit the right narrative. Go into the newspaper. I'm sort of allergic to conspiracy theories in general, but conspiracy theories that don't fit people's political narrative, then they're just utter crackpots. But other conspiracy theories, as I say, it's just in the mainstream media, and there we go.
Obviously, stories like this in a post-Me Too era are falling on fertile ground, and the media love stories like that. Unfortunately, what they're doing is they are pushing young impressionate people into a frenzy, into a psychosis. And I actually wrote an article about it for the website The Lotus Eaters. The article will come out shortly, and I put in some of the quotes from the so-called victims, and a lot of them said the same things. Oh, I was already afraid going out, and then it happened to me. So they prepared themselves to actually become a victim, and then the fact that they got overly drunk or that they passed out, they could only see one explanation for that, and that explanation was not I drank too much and I didn't have anything to eat. That explanation was I must be a victim of a misogynistic hate crime.
Because the thing that people are very reluctant to say is be responsible. Don't get blind drunk to the extent that you don't know who you're with and where you're going and what happened. That's just not a good idea from the point of view of your own personal safety. You're not allowed to say that. You're a sort of rape apologist if you say that, even though it's obviously, you're not doing any apology for rape at all. You're just explaining. But whereas this is something that they do like, that does.
I would like to highlight that one university in England actually wrote a statement, and it was not particularly about the needle spiking. It was about spiking full stop, and it said, please protect yourself, make sure to cover your drinks, and so on. And this university was attacked for victim blaming. So unfortunately nowadays you can't even tell people how to stay safe, because they shouldn't have to protect themselves. And that when I hear that, I'm like, do you want people to get into danger? Do you want young people to get raped? You have to tell people how to stay safe, and that includes don't get drunk, stay with friends, always have a designated driver. I mean, these were things that everybody told young people when we were younger, and now it's victim blaming.
Just very, very briefly, let's talk about the Good Willie case, which I'm sure you've been following, have you? The footballer.
No, I have not.
Right. He was accused of rape. I don't know the details of the case at all. He was accused of rape. It went to trial in the criminal court, and he was not convicted. It was either not proven or not guilty. I'm not sure which it was, but he wasn't convicted. So he was then taken to civil court, where the standard of the burden of proof is much lower. In civil courts, it's the balance of probabilities. So if you think 51%, I think he probably did do it, then you say, yes, guilty. So he was prosecuted, I don't know if that's the right word, found guilty in any case, in a civil court. So he's now regarded as a rapist. He was a footballer at one club, but he moved to another club, and there was outcry, how can the club employ him? There's two issues. First of all, rehabilitation. I mean, is rape utterly unforgivable in terms of re-employing someone? I think we could debate that. But my issue with it is, I don't think you should be allowed to be found not guilty in the criminal court of a really serious crime. So they have a second bite of the cherry, where the standard is like, 51% probability. And he's now branded like that. So the family party policies actually is you shouldn't be able to take someone to civil court after you've been found not guilty in the criminal court. So I think basically this situation shouldn't have happened. But what's your take?
And well, first of all, in regards to both sexual harassment and rape, what I find very troubling is that there is no it seems like there is no differentiation in these cases. To me, it is very, very different if, for example, two people are drunk, have sex, and then one of them claims, oh, it was rape, where both of them were intoxicated. To me, that is very different than, for example, somebody grabbing a woman from a bicycle at night and force it. There are clear differences for me. And I think the topic of sexual assault and rape is so difficult for real victims, because most real victims will never see justice because there are no witnesses there, and it's so difficult to prove. But unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, that's just how it is. We need a working justice system where you need evidence. You cannot have people that are potentially innocent ending up in prison for many, many years. And what you're saying about the criminal justice system and the what's the
civil court?
Civil court. I'm completely with you. This is a criminal matter, and it needs to be dealt with in the criminal custody, not in the civil court.
I was called to be a juror a few years ago. You go along, and then they pick names out of a hat to see who's going to do it. So twice I went to the court. I heard the case presented, but then I wasn't chosen. And both times it was a rape case where it seemed like they'd both been blind drunk. And I just thought, good luck to anyone making any sense out of this, because, I mean, what chance is there of anyone being able to divine what actually happened here. But thankfully, I wasn't selected as a juror. I think our time has flown. That was very interesting. I wasn't aware that that story had been well, spiked. Is that a word you use for a story? If it's been dismissed, if it's been disproved, do they say it's been spiked? They do, don't they?
I don't know if that's appropriate.
Yeah, the spiking story has been spiked. So
exactly, debunked.
Yeah, right. Great to have you with us, Phil. Phil's off to talk to someone in America now, and so am I. So
bye.
Right. Good night. Oh, right. On to this evening's special guest. Okay, welcome, Katy.
So good to see you again, Richard. How are you?
I'm great, thanks. Yeah, remind us where you are again in the States.
Seattle, far, far away, but similar climate.
All right. Okay. And now, those of you who've been regular viewers will remember Katy came on the show. Oh, you're one of the first guests we had, actually, when we started the live stream. Katy's book, if you haven't read it, I would strongly recommend that you get it. I've promoted this at every conference we've had. I think I've said that people really should have a look at this as an introduction to these issues. Now, we're going to talk about various things. I thought we'd start from the beginning with the issues that Katy's interested in. Now, Katy describes herself as a children's rights advocate. Now, if you know me, you know any talk of children's rights in Scotland, it's almost always bad news. It's about undermining parents, letting kids do as they like. No one can tell them what to do, type thing. But Katy, be a refreshing change for us. What's your vision for children's rights?
Yeah, there's a lot of conservatives here in the United States who are like, don't use that word. Don't use that word because it's been so corrupted. It's been so adulterated. But the problem is they don't use it correctly. I do, right? They're talking about children's rights to have transgender treatments, right? Or their a supposed right to privacy so that schools will say, well, kids have a right to privacy so they can hide what they're telling those kids to do related to their sexual identities, right? That is not children's rights. That is adult agenda masquerading in the language of children's rights. So that is not children's rights. Children have fundamental natural rights. That is how we should properly use it. And I think most of us are aware of children's primary fundamental right, and that is their right to life. Children have a right to not be killed, even if they're unwanted, even if they're inconvenient, even if they have a difficult diagnosis. And we've built an entire movement. We have flipped the culture here in America when it comes to the abortion issue because we have so effectively communicated the importance of this natural right. Children also have rights on this side of the womb as well. And the main right they have, other than their right to life, is their right to be known and loved by both their mother and father. And this is something that Scotland has affirmed when they signed on to the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, right? This is right up at the very top of the list of children's rights when it's properly understood. So when I'm talking about children's rights, I'm talking about their right to life, the right to be known and loved by the two people responsible for their existence. And in topics like third-party reproduction and surrogacy, their right to be born free, not bought and sold, not treated as commodities, not swapped and traded and sold to the highest bidder. So I'm talking about children's rights that align with their natural rights, not the pseudo rights that is used to smuggle in adult agendas.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, to hear that, it's so rare to hear that, isn't it? I mean, within mainstream political discussion, mainstream media discussions, certainly over here, it is the missing perspective. It's totally overlooked. I think most people are not even aware that there is such a perspective. It's not that they disagree with it, right? It's just that it just never even entered people's thinking.
Yeah, and here's the thing: when you're done, if you haven't heard this perspective before, you'll never unhear it. Once you start looking at all of these issues from the child's perspective, you're now going to go, wait a second. Why is it that the kids are so ignored? Why is it that adult desires, longings, wants are always prioritized? Why is it the kids that always have to be understanding, accommodating, and sacrifice for adults? You'll never unsee it now, people. No. So welcome to the red pill. It's good to have you here.
Yeah. If you're not quite sure you're there again, then before us, go to Amazon now, order your copy. It's great. I've found a lot of discussions I've had with people. I've said, my priority is the children.
Yep.
And it is as though this is like completely new. Because like you're saying, for them, it's about adults who've got the right to have what they want and to live as they please. And basically children are a right as well. You've got a right to have children by one means or another. And it's almost getting to the stage where people believe it's the duty of the state to provide them with children when they want them. I mean, just saying, Scotland's got a sort of population decline problem on the horizon. One of the government's plans to tackle population decline is to make fertility treatment available to single people, which is quite shocking. They're deliberately producing single parent families. They think that's the way forward. So.
Yeah, so it's too bad that we don't emphasize the importance of healthy reproductive relationships, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there is one known path to child flourishing, and it's not manufacturing them in labs, and it's not intentionally making them motherless or fatherless. It's not removing the influence of male or female from their home. We've been studying family structure for a long time. Mm-hmm. We know what it takes for children to thrive, and it is being raised in the home of their married biological mother and father. That is the recipe for success. That is how you lead kids to child thriving. This is not a situation of, oh, let's just mass produce kids, right? Let's just give it to any and every adult that have the money and means to acquire them. You know, if we want to go all the way down this path, China just came out with a robot nanny that they intend to use to farm children in artificial wombs. So, I mean, like, we could take this all the way to like factory floors of children if you want. So we got to get pretty serious about who are kids. What are they for? Are they object of rights or are they subject of rights, right? Are they things that we owe adults that want them? Or are they subjects? Are they vulnerable people around which adults need to conform in terms of conforming their lives to what children need? So yeah, population decline aside, we had better get this right, because the technology front is going to go more and more anti-child, the more moral and ethical confusion we have on this topic.
Yeah. Could you say, if there's any police officers watching this, that wasn't me, that was Katy talking. Okay.
That's right. That's right. I'm the one
she's out of the country. You can't get her.
That's right. I'm the one that's saying that the radical, crazy idea that kids need moms and dads. That was me.
Yeah. Nothing to do with me. Right. So the technology side, I'm not very familiar with that. So what are they up to? So I've heard about the concept of artificial wombs. I mean, do you know, is that something that's nearing fruition?
So they've been working on it for a long time. But there are some ethical constraints around using it with humans, right? Typically, internationally, there is a cap on using embryos past 2 weeks in terms of experimentation and things like that.
Right.
But China is not so constrained by those kinds of ethical conversations, right? They're the ones that are editing babies using CRISPR technology. And so we're having conversations here too about, should we revise that kind of thing? But even before you're getting into the conversation about artificial wombs, which they're working on, right? And unfortunately, there's some people on the conservative pro-life side who are saying, awesome, this is going to help babies when it comes to the age of viability, kids that can't be, carried full term to their mother. But here's the people that are really salivating, is the reproductive technology people. Because when you are trying to build a baby, when you're trying to assemble a custom ordered child, you need 3 things. You need egg, sperm, and womb. Yeah. Sperm, it's pretty easy to get, right? It's dispensed fairly easily. Eggs, much more difficult to get, much more rare, right? Women produce 1 a month, and it's hard to extract it. So we've recently learned to do that. If she can inject herself with a lot of different hormones, she can super ovulate and produce 10, 20, maybe more eggs. And then you can extract those and sell them. But the hardest thing to put together when you're doing the build a baby model of assembling sperm, egg, and womb is finding a woman who will rent her body for 9 months. It's very expensive. It's very cumbersome. It's extremely high risk. Surrogate pregnancies are always high risk pregnancies. So you're asking a woman to take on medical risk when there's no medical necessity for her, right? So wow, wouldn't it be incredible if we could just cut out finding the woman to rent her body to us altogether. That would save so much money and so many problems in terms of getting these children across international borders, which is often the case when it comes to surrogacy, or getting them across state lines, which can be a little bit difficult here in the United States. Better if we can just custom ordered these children, have them on a factory. I mean, these robot nannies that China is designing can immediately detect whether or not a baby is defective and discard them. I mean, when we're talking about building a superior human, we can just take the eugenic practices, right? The catalogs of sperm and egg donors where we're already selecting the gametes based on their physical appearances or their parents', law degrees. Let's just take that to the next degree. Let's just have 10 options, right? And then as the babies develop, we can see which ones seem to be thriving the most, male, female, discard the ones that we don't. This one has a genetic marker that we're a little concerned about. Ding, ding, ding. And now we can have that one perfect custom ordered child. So this is already happening through surrogacy. It just becomes a lot more cost effective if you can cut the woman out entirely.
Yeah. The CRISPR is a method of gene editing. I don't know much about it apart from that. So how's that been used in China?
Yeah, so I am not the expert on CRISPR either, but it is editing of genes, and it did happen outside of the consensus of the scientific community. The scientist that did it successfully did it in a set of twins, and was censured by the international scientific community. But since then, it has spurned quite a bit of debate about, wow, what is possible? What can we do? Now that it's been done, maybe we should. It's very much the, if we can do it, shouldn't we do it? Instead of going, just because we can do it doesn't mean we should do it. So what is happening in the technological world is far outpacing any of the legal or ethical conversations we are having about these technologies. And the only way to describe the impact it's having on children is commodification.
Yeah. Through our surrogacy, we've introduced a policy banning surrogacy. Surrogacy is banned outright in lots of European countries. In Britain, commercial surrogacy is not allowed. You can only pay for expenses. But the one objection that came up, they said, what about a sister? Sister's married, got the eggs, but for some reason can't carry the child, and her sister volunteers to be the surrogate mum. Now, I would imagine, or you might agree with me, that sounds like the most innocuous possible instance of it. So what would be the problem in that case? Sister helping out her sister to have the baby that she wants.
So let's just talk about what surrogacy is, okay? So surrogacy breaks what should be one person, mother, into three, in essence, purchasable and optional women. The first one is the genetic mother, the woman who contributes the egg. Second one is the birth mother, the one who gestates the child. And the third one is the social mother, the woman who's in the child's life every day. If all three of these women is not found in the same person, the child is going to experience loss. Now, sometimes that happens with the case of adoption, for example, where maybe it's in the child's best interest to sever the connection with the birth mother. And in those cases, we mourn. In those cases, we heavily vet and screen the parents that are going to be taking that child home. In those cases, we make the determination based on the best interest of the child, not what the adult wants, not what they're paying for. And even adoptive parents like me, right? I have an adopted child. He is a gift to us. I am so grateful he's in our life. But we call adoption divine plan B, right? Plan A would have been his mother and father doing whatever they needed to do to orient their life around keeping him so that he didn't have to experience any loss, because he did, and he does, right? That this is one of the reasons why adoption in the United States has swung from overwhelmingly being closed adoptions, where kids didn't have any contact with their family of origin, to now 95% of adoptions being open adoptions, because kids crave and benefit from connection with their first family, right? And so when children lose their birth mother, it hurts them. And I'm an adoptive mom. That doesn't threaten me at all to say that. I see it. I know it. And it's important for me to validate that loss in my child's life, okay? So what surrogacy does is it says, here's these three women. Which one do you want? Which one do you need? Which one do you not have? Which one do you need to pay for, right? And a lot of the times, let's just say that it's the sweet heterosexual couple whose sister is offering her womb. Well, okay, the baby's going to go home with the genetic parents, and thankfully the baby's going to have a mother in their life every day. But what do you think babies are doing for the first 9.5 months of life? Who do you think they know? The day that that baby is born, those two people that are going to take them home are genetically related. But honestly, they're just one of 7 billion strangers in the world. The baby doesn't know them. The baby knows the birth mother, right? We don't put newborns on the chest of random strangers so they can forge a bond.
Mm-hmm.
We put them on their mother's chest because they have
Is there research about this?
Oh, Richard. Welcome to the world of adoption trauma. Absolutely, there's research on this. Studies have showed that even brief maternal deprivation spikes cortisol levels in infants, right? It is the mother who lowers cortisol levels and stress hormones in the baby's body. It's the familiarity of her voice, right? It's her smell that they know, right? And that many adoption specialists would say that separation from the birth mother cannot be processed by the child in any way except to feel that their mother has died. And so that is why we see that even though adoptees are raised by adults who generally have more money, more education, and overall adoptive parents spend more time with kids than the general population does, adoptees still struggle more often in school, more often with substance abuse, more often with suicide attempts. So this bond with the birth mother, our first and primary relationship, we have to take it very seriously. This is why people in crisis pregnancy centers tell the mothers to love and bond with their baby, because that's a real bond. It's real on behalf of the mom, but it's very real on behalf of the baby.
Yeah.
So what do we do in that best case scenario surrogacy situation? You're asking the baby to sacrifice the relationship with the only person that they know on the day of their birth and start over with trust and attachment again. So in the world of them before us, the idea is them, the children, before us, the adult. In all of these marriage and family situations, the idea is we prioritize what children, what they need, what they have a right to. In the world of them before us, children don't sacrifice for adults. Adults sacrifice for children. There is no way to do surrogacy without insisting that a kid sacrifices for an adult. And that's an injustice.
Yeah. So even in the sister case, the impact is measurable.
The baby's losing the only person they know. The baby doesn't know that the woman's being paid or not. Their child's experiencing loss, right? Intentional inflicted loss. All throughout history, we have acknowledged mother loss as a tragedy. Only now are we manufacturing mother loss and calling it progress.
Yeah. Okay, right. So you think we've got our policy right then? So do you agree with that policy? Do you think it should be legally banned? Is that the way you would want it to go in America? Right, okay.
Yes. Okay, and because let's just talk about that. Because usually this is not the baby's going home with the two people genetically related to them. No. What surrogacy does, and really what all third-party reproduction does, is it means that children are items to be acquired by whatever adult has the money and means to put them together. That is what that means. Children belong to whoever can afford them. Whoever can purchase sperm, egg, and womb gets the baby. So that is something that we fought a civil war to outlaw here. The buying and selling and trading of people. Very often the trading of children, separating them from their genetic parents. Okay, so the closest thing that we have since slavery is what is going on right now in the fertility world. Absolutely, it should be banned.
Yeah. What are you saying about the 3 ingredients? I was just hunting for it a minute ago. I couldn't find it. I've got a book that's on the recommended reading list for nurseries in Scotland. So that's the 3 and 4-year-olds. That's got exactly that message. These are the 3 ingredients. And all the people are deliberately ungendered. So you've got sperm, egg, and uterus, and then the important people at the end are the people who are looking forward to the baby. Doesn't matter who they are. Whoever's looking forward to the baby, they're the special people there. I mean, it's just a direct head-on assault to the ideal of natural family. And that's been, say, taught to 3 and 4-year-olds. There should be a massive controversy, huge controversy. But I've never heard, apart from the Scottish Family Party, I've never heard anyone raise the issue in Scotland at all.
Well, you know what's fascinating is the kids grow up and they raise the issue. So I was just testifying this morning in a legislative hearing that's looking to legalize commercial surrogacy in one of our states. And we had two people conceived through sperm donation testifying against the bill because those kids grew up. And even though they were raised by a loving mother and father, they said, we desperately wanted to know the identity of our father. Oh, and by the way, at one point we thought we might have 500 half siblings. Oh, and we just met another half sister 2 weeks ago. She didn't know that she was conceived through sperm donation. Also, she has no idea what her accurate medical history is, and she's going through a medical situation right now. Can't find that information. And so the kids grow up and we tell them when they're young, oh, it doesn't matter, right? You just need to be loved. You just need to be safe. But the kids grow up and now there's a lot of them. And overwhelmingly, they say, my sperm donor is half of who I am. They say, it troubled me that money changed hands during my conception. A lot of them say, I think about my donor all the time and wonder who he is or who she is. Why is that? Because biology matters to kids. It matters in terms of their family structure and it matters in terms of their safety because biological parents tend to create the most safety and connection for their kids. But biological parents also offer something that children crave, and that is their biological identity. These kids say, I don't know who I am because I don't know who my father is. And that should be a no-brainer, except in this ideologically saturated world where adult sexual desire is the god around which everything else must bow. Yeah.
I mean, the book, I said then before us, there's lots of accounts or testimonies, isn't there, in the book? I mean, it's very powerful to read.
Well, that's the point. Is our side in terms of supporting the natural family. We have had research, we have had data, we have common sense, we have natural law. We've had the 5 major religions of the world on our side, but we've never had the stories of kids because it's very expensive for kids to tell these stories. They risk alienating the people they love most in life if they're to talk about how hard it was to grow up with 2 moms and be fatherless, created through sperm donation, or how hard it was to be raised by a single mom that they love so much, but, they've never had a dad and that was really painful. And how do they talk to their mother about that when she paid so much money to create them? I mean, it's just...
I would assume it could be a hate incident. I assume if a child in Scotland said that about their own upbringing.
Well, and it's really
assume logically.
Yeah, I run a couple group chats, secret group chats for kids with same-sex parents, and they can't talk to anybody about this. Even if they go to a therapist and say, I really feel like I've got issues because I'm a man and I grew up without a dad and I really just feel lost in the world of men. And I really would like to know who my father is. Oftentimes the first thing the therapist will say is, well, it's kind of homophobic for you to say that 2 women can't raise a child. So it's not just a crime in terms of what's going on in the UK. Now culture is policing these children's loss and their feelings. So it's really hard to create a safe space for kids to be honest.
Yeah. Just going onto the eugenics line again. I've done a spot of research on this in Scotland. I'd be quite shocked to see what's going on. There's, I think it's a private business, a private clinic that operates within the biggest hospital in Glasgow. So it's under the auspices of the hospital. So I sort of logged on and made myself an account. And it is literally catalogues to choose from. Eye color, interest, musical ability, sports, a photograph. That's a sperm donor. A photograph of the boy when he was very young, a letter from him, an interview with him. It's just happening in plain sight. But again, it's like there's no controversy over, because the idea of eugenics it's pretty controversial. It's a pretty hot topic, you would assume. But one way or another, it's going on under our noses with no controversy. I mean, we're maybe going to try and change that in the weeks to come and stir up a bit of controversy. It's quite shocking.
Well, if you look at any of these issues from the child's perspective, you're going to get an uproar because it is going to disrupt what adults want when it comes to their own desires, their own identification, their own idea of family. And a lot of these adults are going through big challenges. I mean, infertility is a huge burden. Somebody who experiences same-sex attraction, a gay man who would be an amazing father. I understand the deep longing for children and probably rightly recognizing that he would be a great dad, right? A woman who's never found Mr. Right, who wants to be a mom. I mean, like, these are really understandable and difficult burdens and struggles, but none of them justify commodifying children. None of them justify forcing children to sacrifice so an adult can have what they want.
Yeah.
And you're talking about eugenics in plain sight. You don't even have to create a profile. Your followers right now can just Google sperm donor catalog or egg donor catalog. And there's all kinds of public catalogs where you can at least get a picture of what this looks like. You want to talk eugenics? Well, white eggs are a lot more expensive than women who create brown eggs, for example. I mean, there's different price points as well. You know, we've got a whole section in our book about the kids themselves talking about how they feel like eugenic science experiments, because it's very obvious that certain characteristics were desired above other characteristics. And certain people can't even donate, like if you're too short, you know, or if you don't meet some kind of standard, then you can't
freckles
even
were the one in Glasgow. Freckles were a big thing. I thought, does anyone really care about freckles? But people obviously do.
Well, you know, when you're spending 5 or 6 figures to create a child, you have to make sure you get the product exactly right.
Yeah. I'll tell you how I came across. I was looking at some research. It might have been a link from your book. I was looking at some research about same-sex parenting. And it was saying, I think you'll be familiar with this. It was showing basically worse outcomes in every area, apart from slightly better academic attainment. And I thought, oh, that's just a fluke. And then I thought, no, hang on a minute. How are a lot of these children created? You know, half of them is chosen from a catalogue. And I don't think anyone goes through trying to select for low IQ. So is it the case that it's becoming measurable that they have more able children? How long is it going to be before people who have children the old-fashioned way is going to start thinking, oh, yeah, this is a bit unfair, really. These other kids are at the top of they're getting all the prizes there.
Yeah, now you're getting into really the area of like transhumanism, which I'm not an expert on, but we have all kinds of like human machine fusion, human improvement. Like
this is just straight from choosing from a catalog.
So you're talking, and so that's actually true. So when it comes to reputable studies done on same-sex parenting, you are right that overall outcomes are diminished when it comes to kids raised by same-sex parents. But there was a reputable study that came out about 2 years ago from Scandinavia somewhere that showed that kids with lesbian mothers did fare better. Now, I think they categorized that of women that were still together even when the kids had graduated high school. They somehow calibrated that to show it was a stable family. And so I actually asked the kids in the group that I run, I said, what do you guys think about that? Were you good students? Now, these are kids who overwhelmingly had 2 moms, stable 2 moms for the most part, struggle with father hunger, now desperately want to know who their dad is, have identity issues, don't necessarily have strong relationships with their mothers, trying to navigate challenges around, why did you raise me without a dad? But it's true that some of them were stellar students. And so we don't know yet exactly why that is. One of them was chosen from a Jewish sperm donor. Very, very interesting. But we don't exactly know why. We need more studies to replicate this. But I wonder if stability is one of the greatest factors when it comes to that. When it comes to academic achievement, is the stability, because a few of them have said, you know, things were challenging at home, or I had some challenges and I just buried myself in my schoolwork. So I will be really curious to see what other reputable studies, and I say reputable because most of the studies done on same-sex parented households are not using the gold standard of social science research.
I would just say, if people are choosing sperm donors or egg donors, if they're choosing on the basis of sufficient information to have a sort of bit of an inclination of IQ, which I think they often are, then I think that's going to come through quite strongly.
Yeah, there's
IQ is quite heritable.
Yeah.
It's just on the eugenics side, I came across a bit of a response to the point. So if we leave about the issues of donation, we're just talking about the issue of selecting for eugenic reasons. I'm sure you'll come across this argument, but the argument is sometimes put forward that when parents select, for example, for high IQ, the parents are not saying this is the sort of child we want because we want a child we're proud of because they do really well, they're very successful or whatever. The argument they put forward is that the evidence is this is the sort of human being that has the most positive life. So we're actually doing it for the child's benefit, not for the parents who are making the decisions. Have you come across that line?
So I don't talk to a lot of adults that are choosing these technologies. I tend to interface with the kids who are born through these technologies. But I do know that that line of reasoning is very common when it comes to deselecting the life. So there's been a huge uproar in the last 2 weeks here in the United States, where it was shown that some of these prenatal tests that were done on children to show that they have genetic defects or whatever it is, that 70% of the time they are wrong, right? So markers for Down syndrome or cleft lip or cleft palate or trisomy 13 or whatever it is, that a lot of these tests, it came out that 70% of them were wrong, that they're inaccurate 70% of the time. Now, of course, many people make decisions to abort their children based on these test results. And I think a lot of the times they are told, because I have friends who have had difficult diagnoses and difficult pregnancies, and they are told, think about the child. You wouldn't want a child who has to grow up with a condition like this. The child would suffer. This is no kind of life. So yeah, I do think that you often frame it as you don't want a defective kid. You want a kid who is really smart, really pretty, really athletic, because that is what makes it a life worth living, right? Not any of these defective, subpar. And yeah, when you're getting into, my friend Jennifer Lahl, often makes the distinction between begotten, not made, right? Like we are begotten. Once you get into the place where you're making kids, where you're producing kids, you're now like looking at kids as projects rather than gifts.
Yeah. So I was just trying to block a user who's trying to post who knows what on there. But let's just try and get rid of that.
Good luck. Well, I'll just keep talking because I can just go on and on.
No, that's fine. It's not working. That's okay. The other issue, maybe from your social media, I saw this some recent research about same-sex parenting. I mean, how would you describe the state of play in terms of high-quality research on same-sex parenting in particular?
So there was a huge avalanche of studies that were done leading up to Obergefell, which was the case in the United States that legalized gay marriage for the entire country, that came before the Supreme Court. And those were very low quality studies in general. They tended to rely on recruited or volunteer adults. A lot of the times they knew what the study was for in advance. They tended to survey how the parents believed the kids were doing rather than the actual outcomes of the kids themselves. There was a lot of self-reporting, like, does your kid like having two moms? Oh, they do? Great. Has your kid ever struggled? Has your child ever been abused? No, they haven't? Great. And so that was kind of characteristic of the bulk of studies. And some of the studies took one sample group of the same children who were raised by lesbian mothers and then respun and reinterpreted and recalculated those results, or different waves of studying those same children over and over and over. So you'll hear things like, 81 studies were done that showed no difference between children raised by same-sex parents versus kids raised by opposite-sex parents. And so the reality is, like, the Heritage Foundation in the United States did a huge diagnostic of this, and they just concluded bias. There's so much bias in the way, the methodology of these studies, that you really can't extrapolate these results out to the general population. Now, we have had a few studies that have used robust methodological tools, random samples, large control groups, surveying the actual experiences of children once they're adults. Those have produced drastically different outcomes, as you would expect, because what we know whenever we're not studying same-sex parenting, whenever we're studying any other form of household family structure, moms and dads, biology, all of that. Sociologists actually overwhelmingly agree, number one, that moms and dads are different, that men and women offer distinct and complementary benefits to children. Number two, that biology matters, that biological parents are the safest, most connected to, most invested in, and most protective of their kids. And number three, that children suffer trauma when they lose their mother or father, whether it's to death, divorce, abandonment, even, you know, if they're subsequently adopted, like we talked about before, or through third-party reproduction. Like all of these kids who have lost parents through any of these ways, they suffer diminished outcomes. So then it was really bizarre that you had this crop of studies where either mother or father was always missing, one biological parent was always missing, and kids always suffered the trauma of losing one of their parents. And yet magically there was no difference. Right. So it didn't make sense.
I was saying, can we imagine the academic social science establishment coming to the conclusion of, you know, we've done the research and we've decided that our whole ideology is wrong.
Right.
So we're going to have to really turn away from a whole political and philosophical viewpoints, just in the light of the evidence.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's
it's
right.
just not going to happen. I mean, scientists struggle to do that. I mean, proper scientists struggle to do that, let alone in these far more subjective areas. So and then it's very powerful though. This tide of research that's continually coming. It's very reassuring for people who, for whom it's reaffirming their beliefs. It's very reassuring.
Yeah, you can absolutely find studies to support your conclusions. They're just not great studies. And we actually have a lot more to learn, right? This is a newer family structure, especially when it comes to like two dads creating children through surrogacy. Like we have no data on that in when it comes to actual outcomes that these kids have experienced because it's so new. So we have a lot to learn. While we are learning it, we need to fall back on what we know. And that is that children created through third-party reproduction don't fare as well in almost any area. Identity struggles, feeling connected to their parents, feeling commodified, dealing with substance abuse, feeling like they can't trust their parents, right? So we already know that about kids created through reproductive technologies. So we should probably assume that that's what's going to be going on through surrogacy too. We already know that men and women are different and that kids benefit from having a male and female parent. So we should probably assume that that's also going to be true for kids of two dads created through surrogacy. We already know that biology matters to kids, both in terms of their safety, connection, and investment to kids, but also in terms of their biological identity. So we should probably assume that that's also true when you're talking about two dads raising a daughter. So we do have all these new novel family structures that are coming out, but we have rules that we already know about what kids need and what they need to thrive that are going to apply no matter what technology or no matter what political ideology brings us next.
I'm reading a book at the moment. It's by an academic, and they're arguing against the state recognizing marriage at all. So they're saying there should be no laws about marriage, nothing at all. And it's interesting reading the argument because the arguments apply to this area as well. And as far as this author's concerned, the prime thing, as a liberal, as she describes herself, is that no one should distinguish between different choices, different conceptions of what a good life is. So however adults choose to live their lives, it's just plain wrong to try and say, well, that way's better. They're better choices than this way. And it's exactly that same philosophy that comes through here. It's against their principles to start distinguishing, discriminating between different choices that adults make. So it doesn't matter what the evidence is. As a matter of principle, they just think it's wrong to say these people are making better choices than these people. So we should encourage these people and we should discourage this sort of behavior. It's just against their principles.
Well, and that's a lot of the thought process that went along with legalizing gay marriage. That's a lot of the same thought process that polyamorous and polygamous families are now making. Right? Because every argument that you used for gay marriage can be used to forward a polygamous home as well. And it can be argued for the abolition of marriage as well. Because if we're just looking at marriage as an adult-centric relationship, who cares? That's not what marriage is about, right? From a child's perspective, they have a right to exactly two people, their mother and their father. They benefit when they're in relationship with those two people, their mother and their father, not just for 2 months, not just for 2 years, but their entire life. And so, interestingly, nearly every society on the planet throughout history has come up with the same method of uniting these two people to a child all their life. And it was to insist that the man commit to the woman before they engage in a baby making activity and then stay together for life. Yeah. And what they found is when they bound man to woman, the baby got both. And so when you're looking at marriage from an adult's perspective, anything and everything, right? If adult happiness is our guidance, then 2 people, no people, 4 people, 5 years, 50 years, 5 days, who cares? When you're looking at it from the perspective of the child, man, woman, marrying one another exclusively for life, no side partners, no adultery, no open consensual non-monogamy, no thruples, no nothing. Man, woman, mother, father with the kid for life. This institution, government has not had an interest in marriage because they have an interest in your love life. Government has an interest in marriage because it has an interest in children. And this form of marriage, one man, one woman for life, is the only thing that safeguards children's rights and thriving.
Yeah. That's a line of yours that I've stolen. I've used that a few times, actually. Talking about sex as the baby making thing. I find it's great in debates when people are talking about abortion or various, so you did the baby making thing, and then what happened? It's really good. It's really good. It really makes things clear to people. The other day on the BBC, they put out a little podcast thing. You probably know the BBC is as far away from these viewpoints as you can imagine, but they put out this show about elephants. And they had these researchers that have found that young elephants who grow up without a male in the family, anyway, just surrounded by females, they become very violent, and they're starting having frenzied attacks on the rhinoceroses and things. So the researchers have found, this is the thing, and they've seen the chemical changes. Young elephants need a male around them, and then they went on to say, and you know what? The researchers with humans, they found exactly the same thing. These effects are very, very similar. And I thought they would never say that. If someone just pointed out to them that what they're saying is effectively an argument for traditional family structures, they will pull the plug on that show immediately. They'll be so embarrassed by it, it will be banned. But they obviously hadn't quite put 2 and 2 together for what they were arguing for. Fascinating.
That's the thing, is like, natural law will not stay hidden forever. You can't hide from it. You can't run from it. It will resurface, right? This is not a law like my friend John Stone Street at the Colson Center says. This isn't like a law that you're making up. This is a law like gravity. If you step off the roof, your ideology is not going to save you, right? Marriage is built into the human world like gravity. It's that kind of law. You'll rediscover it somehow. And we certainly have discovered it when we look at the 70 to 85% of incarcerated males who grew up without a dad, because just like male elephants, when you don't have a dad in the home, you are prone to violence and criminality. For young girls, they're prone to becoming teen mothers, much more likely, right? You can look at almost predictable patterns that happens when kids are fatherless. In fact, we spend we detail this in the first chapter of our book, that almost every major social issue that we're facing in the United States, social ill, teen homelessness, youth poverty, school dropouts, social and emotional issues, drug and alcohol abuse, teen incarceration, teen suicide, all of those kids have something in common. And that is that they're disproportionately fatherless. Warren Farrell, the author of The Boy Crisis,
he's been on the show.
Oh, he's so great, right? He just said the greatest predictor of teen suicide is not having a dad in your house. So it's not like, all of these things that we say, love makes a family, any two will do, kids don't need moms and dads. you can say
Yeah.
whatever you want as long as you never confront reality, as long as you never look at the natural world.
Yeah. There's a political party in Scotland called the Liberal Democrats. They're similar to all the others, but they make this particularly. I mean, they're big campaigners for children's mental health issues at the moment. You know, we need more counsellors in schools. We need more psychiatry units, and you name it. More money needs to be spent on youth mental health. When it comes to marriage, their view will be exactly like I was describing earlier. It's against their principles to even begin to suggest that adults should modify their choices or be influenced in any way for the benefit of children.
Well, I think you said it earlier that it's almost like a religion. And in this religion, sexual pleasure and the way you sexually identify is God. And what do we do with our gods? We sacrifice to them. So with this God, children are the inevitable sacrifice every time.
Yeah. Well, time has marched on. One last plug. Then Before Us, Katy Faust. Go to Amazon. So strongly recommend that. If I had to recommend 3 books for someone to read to be inducted into the family party, this would be one of them. So I'd say I would really encourage you to get hold of that. Katy, that was brilliant. Again, I do hope you'll be able to join us again in a few months' time, because what you're talking about, what you're campaigning on, it's really the core issues to us in the Scottish Family Party. And it's just good to talk to someone on the same wavelength, because often you feel like a voice in the wilderness, don't you, on these issues.
Well, you've got reality on your side. You've got the needs of children on your side. So all of you should be speaking out loudly, boldly, confidently. The book will definitely help you do that. So I'm very grateful for your platform. Truth, as my co-author says, truth has a ring to it. And so, you know, when you keep speaking the truth, you are going to wake some people up to the reality of what these damaging ideas are doing to kids.
Yeah. Well, thanks very much. Thanks for watching. I'm sorry I didn't engage with any comments. We were engrossed in our conversation, but I've seen lots of comments there. So appreciate that. And those of you who are going to watch later as well, I hope you found that interesting. But thanks very much, Katy, and hope to see you in a few months. Right. Good night, everyone.
Take care.